Welcome to lecture number 12. In this lecture, we will cover functions, events, and form validation in JavaScript. So let's start with functions. Functions are one of the fundamental building blocks in JavaScript. A function is a set of statements that performs a task or calculates a value. Again, this is not something new that we are studying. We already have done functions in other programming languages as well. It should take some input and return an output where there is some obvious relationship between the input and the output. Now let's see how we can define functions. A function definition, also called as a function declaration or function statement, consists of the function keyword followed by the name of the function, then a list of parameters to the function enclosed in parentheses and separated by commas, and the JavaScript statements that define the function enclosed in curly braces. So let's have a look at the example of function definition. We need to write first of all the function keyword, the name of the function, then the list of parameters separated with commas. We are having just one parameter right now, and then within which we are having certain statements that are enclosed within curly braces, along with a return statement, because functions are supposed to return some value. So we return number multiplied by number. So it's returning the value as the square of a number. So the number is being multiplied by number itself. Let's have a look how we can call this function. Now, how we can call these functions. Defining a function does not execute it. Defining it names the function and specifies what to do when the function is called. So you can say that definition is only the existence of that function. Necessarily, it doesn't really mean that we are executing it, because we are not calling it. Hence, if you are not calling it, you will not get any result. Though it is already executing it, means though it is already calculating it, but not showing any result. Calling the function actually performs the specified actions with the indicated parameters. For example, if you define the function square, you could call it as follows. And just write down the name of the function. And if the function declaration is having any parameter, you need to pass the value to that parameter. Let's create our function now with a function keyword, and I'll take the name as square because we have to find out the square of a number. We'll pass one parameter as number. Now within this, you may or may not use a return statement. So, but let's say right now I'll be using this return statement so that I can return some calculated value, number multiplied by number. We are doing this calculation because we have to find out the square of the number, of the same number, right? You see that there is nothing on the web page. It's because we haven't called this function yet. This is just the existence, the declaration of our function. In order to show the value, in order to calculate, in order to execute a function, we need the function call. So call this function, write in the name of the function and pass any value. Let's say if I write 6. 6 multiplied by 6 will give 36. So function has been called, but you see there is nothing on the web page. It's because we are not printing. We are simply calling this function. The function call is definitely, you can say, calculating this number multiplied by number, but it's not printing it because we are not using any statement that is capable of printing that value. So you can either use console.log or you can use document.write. Both will be correct here. So let's say if I write here, I'll be writing document.write method here, and will enclose the function call within this. So you can see that it is printing 36 for us. Same way you can use console.log as well. You need to open the console and the result will be visible to you. Now, next important point is that in JavaScript, you really don't have to use the return statement. You may or may not use it. Now, how it is possible to print this calculation, the calculated value without using the return statement? It's quite simple. All you have to do is, first of all, remove the printing statement, the statement that is printing on your web page. Just do a function call. Remove the return statement from your function declaration and use that statement that is capable of printing the result on the browser. Now you can use document.write. And yeah, that's it. You can see that the result is being printed. Let's discuss another important concept regarding functions in JavaScript, and that is function hoisting. You must have remembered we talked about hoisting in the video where I discussed about the differences among var, let, and const. So same concept also is applicable here. Hoisting is a concept or behavior in JavaScript where the declaration of a function or a variable or class goes to the top of the scope they were defined in. So let's take an example. Let's say we are having a function declaration and the function is supposed to calculate the square. But as you can see, we are not having the function call below the function definition. It is actually above the function definition. You can see that console.log square, the function call is here. Means the function is being called before it is declared. This is called as function hoisting. And there will not be any kind of error in this case. Let's implement this with an example. We can consider the same example. All you have to do is just pick up line number 11 where you are calling the function, place it above the function definition, and you see that it is printing the result for us without any error. This is called as function hoisting. But you must remember that function hoisting is not possible in arrow functions. Actually, in modern JavaScript, we have shorthand version to create functions, and that is with the help of arrow functions. So what we do is, instead of writing the function keyword, we create a variable instead. Let's say I'm creating a variable as square, put equal to sign, and instead of using, we have removed the function keyword. Obviously, we don't now need the name of the function. We are not writing the function keyword, no need of name of the function as well. So if your function is not having any parameter, you can keep it empty and use arrow symbol, which is represented with an equal to sign and the angle bracket. Now, since we are having the parameter, you are going to pass this parameter as well. As you can see that the function call is done before we are defining it. So it's not printing anything. So just place it below the function definition. Now it will be visible. So this thing you need to take care of. Next we have function scope. Variables defined inside a function cannot be accessed from anywhere outside the function because the variable is defined only in the scope of that function. Let's try this function scope with a few examples in order to understand it in a better way. Again, we are having the same function where we are passing a parameter and we are having a return statement. So let's say we don't want this parameter here. Instead, we can define it as a global variable. Let n equals to 6. So if I write here let n equals to 6, so that is obvious we do not need the parameter value here. So just the function call is required. Will this function be able to access this global variable? The answer is yes. As you can see the result, it is able to calculate this value. because this variable is global in scope. Hence, any function will be able to access this variable. But is it possible to access the variable if the same variable is inside some other function? Let's say if I create one more function whose name I'll take as, let's say, addition. I want to add two numbers, so I'm taking the name as add. So I'll define this function and instead declare the same variable within that function. So now you can see that the result disappears. There's no result because function sq is not able to access the variable n since it is not in its scope. It is not in its own scope, and this variable n is not even global. It is now only scoped to this function, that is add function. Let's consider another case where you are having a nested function. So if I take this function to the add function, it's now a nested function. Will this nested function be able to access the value of n? The answer for this is yes, it will be able to. Right now the result is not visible because we are required to make a few changes. First of all, we need to return this function within add function, that is return sq. Now here, after this function that is outside the function, we need to call add function. So once you have called this add function, you will be able to get the result. So these are a few important things regarding the scope of the variables that should be taken care of while you are answering your questions. Next is events in JavaScript. You must have gone through certain websites, and actually we go through such websites every day where we have to click on some button, where we have to mouse over any image, we need to mouse over the text box, or we need to change the value in the text box. So all that is what? That is events. So if we talk about events in general, events are the things that happen in the system you are programming. So that time your system produces or fires some signal when that event occurs. And also it will provide a mechanism by which an action can be automatically taken when that event occurs. So obviously whenever you are clicking on some button, some action is required to be taken. If you are clicking, you might be expecting some action to happen. Maybe that button is going to show you some alert box, or maybe that button is supposed to take you to some web page, and so on. Anything might happen. So events are basically categorized into mouse events, then we have keyboard events, and then form-based events. So let's first of all come to the mouse events. So certain events that we are going to cover in this lecture. The first one is on-click. On-click happens when the user clicks on an element. Then on context menu, when the user right clicks on an element. On DBL click. DBL means double click. So a user double clicks on an element. On mouse down. A mouse button is pressed over an element. Then we have on mouse enter. The mouse pointer moves into an element. On mouse leave. The mouse pointer moves out of an element. Then on mouse move. The mouse pointer moves over an element. On mouse out, the mouse pointer moves out of an element. Then we have on mouse over. The on mouse over, in this the mouse pointer moves onto an element. Then we have on mouse up. A mouse button is released over an element. Alright, so let's first of all insert one image. The image I want to include is solar.jpg, and let's change its height and width to make it smaller. Height as 100 and width also let it be 100. So we have got one image. Now what we want is that when we are clicking on this image, first of all you must understand that it can be any element. I'm just inserting an image for demonstration. So any element can be included. It can be a button, it can be a text box, or it can be any heading tag, it can be a paragraph or anything else. Right now we just included one image. So I'll zoom in this image. So image is zoomed. So what we want is that whenever we are clicking on this image, remember we have to click on the image. So when we click, an alert should be generated. So let's check it out how to do that. So in order to do that, we need to create a function. A function has to be called when you are using the onClick. So the first event we are using is the onClick event, that whenever the user clicks on the element. We need to create one function. Now we already know how to create functions. The name of the function, let's say generate alert. This is the name of my function, generate alert. For example, generate an alert when we are clicking on the image. So for this you will have to use the onClick event. OnClick event can be used as a function, as an attribute within the HTML element. Use onClick. OnClick equals to, this onClick is an event that can be used inside the HTML element as an HTML attribute. You need to call this function as we have done function calls. So obviously here also we need to call this function when we are clicking on this image. So when you call this function, an alert should be generated. So my function is now called. My function definition is also already there. So all now you have to do is you need to include the alert box. Let's say you clicked on this image. Right. So let's click on this image. You can see that it is now generating an alert for us. Now, one important thing that was not discussed in the previous lectures of JavaScript, and that is the right placement, the right place of the script tag. So I would like to let you know that head tag is actually not the right tag where you have to include your script tag, even though it is going to work, no problem in that. But in real world web pages, whenever your web page or the website loads, first of all, the head tag loads. So if your head tag is loading, it means that you are going to load your script tag as well. JavaScript is a very complex code. So what you might want is that whenever the user goes to your website, the user first of all be able to at least see the HTML content. What if the HTML content is not visible and you are simply loading the JavaScript? The button, the user has to click on the button, but button is not there. How it is possible? So the right placement of the script tag has to be in the body tag. That is right when the body closes. Not when the body starts, but when the body tag is closing. Means, first of all, the HTML part should be loaded. So when the web page loads, it is going to load your head tag. That is the important information regarding your website. All the meta tags will be loaded. Then it will come to the body. It will load all your HTML, as well as your CSS. Yes, the CSS will also be loaded along with HTML, because all we need is HTML and the CSS. Later on, we can expect the user to perform some interactivity. So interactivity can be performed with the help of JavaScript. So that is the reason that we always should place the script tag when the body tag is closing. But in these kinds of programs, it really doesn't matter, because we are doing short programs where we are simply demonstrating the things. But in real world, the placement, the right placement of script tag is inside the body tag after your HTML. Let's try all other mouse events. So I'll be simply changing the name of the event here. So first of all, we already have used onClick. Now we have onContextMenu. In onContextMenu, you need to right click on the image and it will generate the alert. So I just right clicked and hence it is generating the alert. Then we have on DBL click. On DBL click is generated when you are double clicking. So I just double clicked on the image and it generated an alert. Then after this we have on mouse down. In on mouse down we need to press, you can say we need to press the left click of the mouse. So well, this is pretty much like the on click, but in case of on click we are clicking and then releasing. That time it will generate. In case of on mouse down, you need to keep it clicked, so that time it will generate. Even if you don't release the mouse click, doesn't matter. Then after that we have on mouse enter. In on mouse enter, you don't have to click. There's no double click, there's no right click. Just simply take your cursor over the element and it will generate the alert. And alongside, if you want, you can also change this message. So you can simply change this message to, rather than writing this, you can write an event occurred. This is simply a message, so necessarily doesn't mean that if the message is click, you are clicking on the image. So any message can be written here. Now after this, we have on mouse leave. What happens in on mouse leave? You first of all take your cursor over the image. Okay, nothing will happen. Now you need to leave this element. Once you are leaving the element, an alert will be generated. Next event is on mouse move. Let's write here on mouse move. When does it occur? It occurs when you are moving your mouse cursor over the element. So right now if I'm moving, you will see that there is just one alert. So nothing special is happening here. It's like the same as we did it using on mouse enter. But there is a difference. All that is, we need to try out a different example this time in order to understand on mouse move. Let's consider a variable. Let count equals to 0. So I have initialized one variable count is now declared. So whenever this event occurs, that is on mouse move, this function will be called. So let's change the name of this function instead. I'll take it as, let's say, counting. Any function you can take, any name you can take. So I write here counting. So we are supposed to print the count whenever the user is moving over the element. So we will just count plus plus. So the count keeps incrementing once the user is moving over the element. And within this function, we can write console.log. Let's write console.log and write down count. So means that as many times this on mouse move element occurs, those many times it is going to increment. Right. So let's check it out. First of all, let's also open our console. Let's open the console as well. Alright. This is our image. I'll just shift this to right. So our console is also visible and the image is also there. So you need to take your cursor. You can see that every time I'm simply moving my cursor, and can you see the console that it is printing the count? It is printing the count as many times my cursor is being moved. So hope this is clear to you that how on mouse move works. But same will not be the case if you are using any other event. For instance, let's write here on click. So you know that on click will just work once. So if I'm clicking here, that's it. So it will print the value once. I clicking second time, then again count has increased. Clicking third time, count has increased. So every time I will have to click for this. Similarly for double click, every time I'll have to double click. Every time I need to use on mouse enter, I will have to enter it again and again in order to increase the count. But on mouse move is different. in on mouse move, you just have to move over the element, and those many times it's going to increase the count. Next event is on mouse out. So let's write here on mouse out. So on mouse out means that first of all, let's enter this element, and now you need to take back your cursor. Now you are on mousing out, and hence it has now increased the count. Similarly, you have another event that is on mouse over. On mouse over, so means that whenever you are mousing over the element, it will increase the count. So you can actually make your program to do anything that you want. You can increase the count, you can generate the alert, you can change the color of your elements, and you can also change the color or the CSS of any other element by clicking on one element. So anything can be done. Then we have on mouse up. So how on mouse up works, you have to click on the element and then release the click. So once the click is released, then you will be able to call that function. In the mouse events, you must have noticed that few of our events appear to be the same. For example, on mouse enter and on mouse over, on mouse leave and on mouse out. These two pairs of events appear to be the same, but there is actually difference. So now we have to understand the difference. Rest all other events are quite different, and the difference is evident just by if you click, you know what is happening. If you are double clicking, you know what is happening. But in these events, it's very difficult to judge. For understanding the differences among these two pairs, we have to take a different example. For understanding this example, let's create a div tag, and we will place this image within this div tag. So now you know that what I am trying to do. I'll create a parent element and a child element, that is child element is our image. Let's style our div tag now. For div tag, I'll be using the type selector, that is div, and give it some height, let's say 200 px, and width, let's say this also 200 px, and give it some background color. Let's say the background color is blue violet. So right, you can see that the parent element is now visible to us. Let's change the color. Let it be yellow instead. Right, so div has been created. Now we have a child element, that is the image, and a parent element, that is this yellow div. Now let's first of all use here on mouse over. On mouse over we have used, it means that we have to mouse over the element. But right now what we are doing, we are using this function, using this event when we are mousing over the image. We don't want to mouse over the image. Let's do it for the div tag. Let's do it on the parent element. So right now what we expect, that whenever we are mousing over the parent element, and this count should be increased. So let's try it. So I'm taking my cursor, carefully watch this cursor, I'm taking it. So you can see that it has printed 1, means the count is now increased. Again I'll take it here, the count is increased. Now I'll take to the child element. Child element is also part of the parent element. So when I'm taking the cursor over the child element, that time also it is increasing the count. It means that it is working twice. Once it is working for the parent element, and it's working for the child element also separately. So this is on mouse over. Same thing we have to check for on mouse enter. Now in case of on mouse enter, take your cursor over the element, over the parent element. Now take your cursor over the child element, nothing happens. So it will consider it only once. So once you have entered your div, doesn't matter where you are, whether you are on the child element or you are on the div element, doesn't matter. It has increased the count just once. So it is not going to increase it again. In the similar manner, we have on mouse out, which works when you are leaving an element. So enter your div element, now leave it, so it will increase the count. Similarly, now you leave your div element here and enter the child element, it will again increase the count. Now leave your child element, it will again increase the count. But same is not the case with on mouse leave. It is quite the opposite of on mouse. You can say it's the opposite of on mouse enter. So once you are inside, you leave, it will increase the count. But when you are on the child element and you are leaving the child element and the div element, nothing happens. So the count is increased just once. Now next kind of event is keyboard events. So these are those events that are fired when we work with the keyboard, when we work with the keys of our keyboard. So the first one is on key down. It occurs when the user presses a key. Then we have on key press. Again, a user presses a key. We'll be implementing these two and understand the differences later. So another one we have is on key up. A user releases a key. So when the user presses the key and then the key is released, that time it will be generated. So this is differentiable, but what about the above two? So let's implement all these. The keyboard events are also associated with the form-based events. So these work when we are actually required to give some kind of input. Let's say a text box. So that time these are going to work. Let's insert one text box. So text box I'll be inserting after this div tag. Input type equals to text. We can include a break tag as well. Right, so a text box has been inserted. I'll zoom in this. Right, the text box is inserted. So within this text box, we need to press some key. So for this, we will have to use the event on key press. First of all, I'll use on key down, and I need to call a function. I need to define a function first of all. Let's say if I write key. So this is simply the name of this function, key. And what is required to be done? An alert should be generated. So I'll be using an alert, let's say keyboard event occurred. Keyboard event occurred. Right. And let's call this function. The name of this function is key. Right. So we are using on key down. Now what do you expect? We have to press a key. So when you press the key, that time, immediately the event will occur. So right now, I'll just press a letter A. So you can see that it has generated an alert right when I pressed this letter, when I press this key. I'll press another one. Actually, I'm not releasing the key. I have just pressed it. So once you press, it will generate the alert. Another one is on key press. On key press is also pretty much the same. You need to press any key and it will generate the alert. Right, so now what is the difference? Let's check it out. Right now we are having on key press. Okay. So I just deleted this character using backspace. So you know that the backspace is also a key. So when this backspace key is pressed, nothing happens, means an alert is not generated. Now let's try out on key down. So in on key down, let's say if I'm writing some letter and write. So M is written here. Now if I backspace, So when a backspace is used, that time also event is occurring. So that is the main difference, that when you are using on key press, only the specific keys are going to work, like letters and numbers are going to work. When you're using on key down, special keys such as function keys, caps lock, tab, shift, alt, control, backspace, all of these keys are going to work in case of on key down. So that is the main difference between on key down and on key press. Right. Now finally we have on key up, which is quite easy. So on key up is generated when you are releasing the key after pressing. Remember, when you are releasing the key after pressing. Okay, so let me write down some letter. Let's say I want to write M. So can you see, I have just pressed it and I have actually kept it pressed. So it will keep writing. Unless I release, event will not be generated. I have released my key now. Now this event has been generated. Moving on to the other kind of events, that is form-based events. First of all, we have on blur. This event fires when an element has lost the focus. So we will understand this with example only. Right now we can go through all these events. Then we have on change. This event occurs when the value of form element is changed. On focus occurs when the element gets the focus. On select fires after some text has been selected in an element. Then we have on submit. This will occur when a form is submitted. Finally, we have on reset, and it will occur when a form is reset. We will implement these events one by one now. Alright, so I'll be working with the same text box for the demonstration. Now, what is the meaning of blur? First of all, you need to understand the meaning of focus. Focus means that your element is now under focus. Let's say I clicked here. My element is now focused. Now I can start writing something in this text box or so. This can be done with the help of either your mouse click or can be done with the help of tab key on your keyboard. So just your element should be selected. That is what focus is. And the opposite is blur. So when I'm clicking outside, well, it doesn't really mean I have to click outside. It only means that the element has to lose the focus. So once your element has lost the focus, that is called as blur. Now let's check it out with the example. This time I'll be taking a very different and interesting example. We will be changing the color of a text box whenever an event occurs. So right now, first of all, let's use on blur event. This is our very first event that we are required to use. And let's comment this as well. We can also change the name of the function, but let it be as such for now. In order to change the color of a text box whenever this loses its focus, we need to give our text box an ID. Give it some ID. Let's say I'm giving txt. Anything you can give. We already have done this. Now next is we'll be using CSS within our JavaScript function, which is quite new thing for you as of now. So for this, you have to access the ID of your text box by using this method. We'll be covering these DOM methods in the upcoming lectures as well. But for now, we have to use because we need to change the color of our text box. So every time you need to do something with your element, you need to access its ID. Document.getElementById. by ID. Pass the parameter, that is the ID of your text box. Now after this, you need to use the style. So we are using style in order to change the, in order to change the CSS, in order to change the color of a text box. After writing style, you have to write down the name of your property with which you want to work. So write here background color. So can you see that the background color that is here, it is different from the one as we used in CSS, normal CSS. The normal CSS background color consists of hyphen, background hyphen color. But when you use CSS within the JavaScript code, within the script tag, there is no hyphen. And also the property changes to a, you can say it's camel case. So camel case is that the initial letters are small. The first word is small while the second word's first letter is capital. So use background color and put equal to sign. Let's say I'll use pink. Right. So let's start. My text box is now focused. So nothing happens as usual. It should not work because we are focusing. Now I have to lose the focus. Once my text box loses the focus, it turns pink. In the same way, we can use other events as well. Now let's change our event to the next event, that is on change. It will occur only when some change is detected within the text box. I'm clicking inside, clicking outside, nothing happens. Now you write something within it. Now you click outside. So it will now change its color to pink. Reason is that your element has now detected some change. On change is pretty much like on blur. But on blur works every time your element is losing focus. On change will work only when your element has detected some change, though it is also associated with on blur, because it will not detect any change while you are writing within the text box. So it doesn't know that some change has occurred. Only change will be detected when your element loses the focus. Right. But when you are simply losing the focus without writing anything in the text box, that time it will not change its color. So that is the difference between on blur and on change. Our next event is on focus. On focus is exactly the opposite of on blur. Quite easy. Your element should be focused. That's it. So it doesn't matter how you are focusing it, whether you're doing it with your tab key of the keyboard, you're doing it with the mouse click, doesn't matter. It's now focused, so it will now change its color. Next event is on select. On select occurs when the content of your element is selected. Let's say I'm writing here hello. Now if I select it, after selection of this text, the color of this text box changes. We are still left with two more events, that is on submit and on reset, that we will be covering along with form validation. So this is our next topic. When you enter the data, the browser or the web server will check to see that the data is in correct format and within the constraints set by the application. For example, you want to create an account on some social media website or on some e-commerce website. So whenever you create account, you are bound to enter the correct details. You are bound to enter the full details. You cannot leave anything blank. This is what the organizations want, because they need the complete information. For instance, let's say you have a field called as email, but you are not entering a correct email, or you're not writing @ you are simply writing 1 2 3 or ABC. It will not take it. So it has to consider the correct format. And another kind of validation is a blank field validation. So where you need to put something into the form element. So when you are leaving your form element empty, a different kind of error will be generated. And if you are filling out, even if you are filling something in your form element, but that is incorrect, a different kind of error will be generated. So every time an error has to be generated depending on whatever the user is doing. Right, so we'll be taking the example of a form. So that form we already have created in our previous lectures when we did forms in HTML. So let's take that example only and take it forward, and in order to implement the validation. You must be clearly remembering this form. We created this form in lecture number 9. So we have submit button and a reset button. When we click on submit, the form should be submitted. Right. So what we are supposed to do is that whenever any field is left blank, that time an error should be generated, be it in the form of alert box, or you can display it below your text boxes. Right. So for this, let's first of all create a function, and the name of this function, let's say I'll take as validation. Now in order to check that whether my form field is blank or not, we need to use if else statement. So we already have covered if else statements. So let's use if. Now how to know that whether it is blank or not? You need to use the empty string format. But how to access that specific text box? That can be done with the help of document.getElement by ID. So write document.getElement by ID. Now you access the ID of your first form element, that is name. So check what is the right. So that's here, input type equals to text, placeholder equals to first name, last name. So here the ID is name. So I'll be using this ID. I'll put here name. And I'll have to access its value now after accessing the ID. Accessing the ID is not enough. You have to access its value. So use dot and then write value. Document dot get element by ID and dot value. Now you check whether it is equivalent to empty string or not. So if it is empty, then error should be generated. Now where to display that error, that is the point. For instance, let me just simply generate an alert box. Let's write here name is mandatory, or you can write you cannot leave it blank. I write here name is mandatory. Right. So let's check if something happens or not. So my name field is empty. If I click on submit, so you can see that still nothing happens. It means that some more changes are required. We actually haven't called this function yet. So come to your form tag and we use now on submit. On submit event is always supposed to be used with the form tag. On submit equals to, I need to use return and validation. So now if you click on the submit form button without writing anything in your first text box, it will generate an error. Right. Now in the similar way, we have to perform validation for the other text boxes, means other form elements. But let's not write alert here. We will now try something different. Let's display the error below our form elements. For all this, we will have to use a span tag below each and every element. So let's use instead a span tag. Let's include a span tag. So right now I'll be doing it just for one element, that is the first one. Input type equals to text and ID equals to name. That is our first text box. So let's include one span tag and I'll give it one ID. Let's say I'm giving the ID as error name. So error name is given. Now we will have to show the message below this text box. Now in order to show this message, you need to access the ID of the span tag. So access the ID as document.getElement by ID, and you need to write down the ID, that is error name. Now how will you display the error? It was easy to generate the error using alert box. For changing the content inside the span tag, you have to use inner HTML. So inner HTML is used whenever you want to change the content of any tag that is capable of holding some content, some text. Okay, so .inner HTML we have to use, and the content should be changed to. You can also use inner text also. You can use inner text as well. That is also correct. Inner text equals to name cannot be left blank. Right, name cannot be left blank. So can we just test it? So you can see that the error is visible. It is somehow working, but the error is going away. So we have to preserve this error. Why it is going away? Because we are not preventing our button from submitting this form. So we have to prevent this button from submitting the form. For this, you will have to take a variable. Let's say I'm taking a variable as isValid, a Boolean variable whose value is already true. So whenever your text box is empty, error is displayed, you need to put this isValid to false. That is, you are preventing your button from submitting the form. Right, and once all the form elements have been validated, so you will also have to return this variable that is valid. Right, now after this, when you click on submit, you can see that the error is now preserved. Now let's say if I'm writing my name in this, now I'm clicking on submit. So you can see that now the error is going away. In the same manner, you can validate your other form elements. So right now your error is visible as, you can say that it's in black color, but you can make it red by giving a class to your span tag. Give it a class. Let's say that's error. The class name is error. And come to the style tag and write this class. Give it color as, let's say, red or crimson. I'm giving red. So every time you're clicking on submit form, the error will be visible as a red color. It's the end of the lecture. These are the references. And these are the program links. That's all for this lecture.